The wind cut through the trees like a sharp knife, carrying snowflakes that stung the veteran's face as he trudged through the frozen forest. Every step sank deep into the powdery blanket of white, leaving footprints that quickly disappeared under the relentless drift. The mountains loomed above, silent and imposing, their peaks barely visible through the swirling gray clouds. It was the kind of cold that gnawed at bones, the kind that made every movement a test of will. James had walked this trail countless times, but today the forest felt different. There was an almost imperceptible tension in the air, a quiet hum beneath the normal hush of winter. Somewhere in the distance, the wind carried the faint echo of movement, a rustle, a snap of a branch, something alive. He paused, squinting through the haze of snow, listening. The forest was full of shadows and whispers, and each one seemed to stretch just a little too long. He adjusted the strap of his pack, the leather creaking under his gloved hands, and took another careful step. Memories tugged at him, shouts in a faraway desert, the smell of smoke, the sharp sting of loss, but he forced them aside. Out here, alone, the past was a whisper, survival was immediate. And then, beneath the howl of the wind, he heard it, a tiny, desperate whinny, fragile and broken. It was almost swallowed by the storm, but enough reached him to freeze his blood. Something was out here. Something small. Something scared. James's heart quickened, the veteran instincts kicking in. He crouched low, scanning the snow-covered underbrush. The forest had always been unforgiving, but today it had a secret. A life hidden in the white silence, waiting. James moved carefully, boots crunching softly in the snow, every sense straining for movement or sound. The whinny came again, weak and quivering, carried faintly on the wind. He froze, listening. It was close, but not close enough to see clearly. His breath fogged in the icy air as he crouched lower, scanning the snow-laden underbrush. There it was. A small shape huddled behind a fallen pine, its tiny body shivering uncontrollably. James's heart clenched. A foal. Its coat was dusted with snow, matted and frosted around its delicate legs. The thin animal lifted its head, ears flicking, eyes wide with terror. It was abandoned, alone in the merciless cold, and he could see the faint rise and fall of its chest, shallow with exhaustion. Instinct overrode caution. James knelt in the snow, careful not to startle it. "Hey there, little one," he murmured, voice low and gentle, though the words felt almost meaningless against the howl of the wind. The foal took a tentative step back, nostrils flaring, breath steaming in the cold. Its eyes reflected raw fear, but also an odd spark of recognition, like it knew he was different from the threatening shapes of the forest. James dug into his pack, pulling out a thermal blanket and a bottle of water he always carried on long hikes. Slowly, methodically, he laid the blanket over the foal, murmuring reassurances. Its legs trembled violently, and he could see frost clinging to its fur. Panic fluttered in his chest. He had no time to waste. He wrapped his coat around the foal, holding it close to shield it from the wind, and felt a fragile life pressing against him. Memories of failure, of people he couldn't save, flashed unbidden, but he pushed them away, focusing only on the small, quivering animal in his arms. For a moment, the forest seemed to hold its breath, the wind softening as if curious about this fragile alliance. Then, from deeper in the woods, a new sound, heavier, more deliberate, reached his ears. The foal stiffened, ears pricked forward. James followed its gaze, a cold knot of unease forming in his stomach. Something was watching. Something big. The storm was no longer just snow. It was about to reveal a secret. James knew he couldn't leave the foal out in the open. The wind had grown sharper, whipping snow into blinding sheets, and the temperature had plunged to a brutal edge. Every exposed inch of skin tingled with frostbite's slow bite. He scanned the forest floor, searching for shelter. A fallen grove of pines offered some protection. Snow had piled unevenly over their branches, forming a natural canopy. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. He cleared the snow, his hands red and stiff despite the gloves. Carefully, he laid the foal on the blanket, wrapping it around the small body. The animal's trembling slowed just slightly, as if it could sense that he wasn't going anywhere. James whispered reassurances, half to calm the foal, half to steady his own nerves. Out here, every second mattered. Hypothermia didn't wait, and neither did the storm. Digging through his pack, he found some dried oats and a bottle of water. The foal sniffed the food cautiously, then nibbled slowly, shivering with effort. James held the water to its lips, coaxing it to drink. It was exhausting work, but necessary. Every instinct from his years in the military kicked in, the calm efficiency, the focus under pressure. He checked its legs, its chest, its weak pulse. Alive. But barely. Hours passed like frozen minutes. The storm intensified. Snow fell in thick curtains, obscuring the forest, muting sound, and making the landscape almost unrecognizable. James dug his own small trench in the snow beside the foal, huddling close to share warmth. He whispered stories to it, strange tales from his own past, anything to keep panic at bay. Then came the first real warning. A low, heavy sound in the distance, rhythmic and deliberate. Snow shifted, shadows moved in shapes too large to be deer. The foal froze, ears pricked, nostrils flaring. James tensed, scanning the blur of white. His heart thumped painfully. Whatever was out there, it was big. Too big to ignore. For a moment, doubt crept in. Could he protect the foal? Could he survive this wilderness alone, against both the storm and the unknown presence watching them? But he forced the fear down, replaced it with action. He tightened the blanket, whispered steady reassurances, and prepared to move. There was no time to hesitate. The foal leaned into him, weak but trusting. James felt a spark of determination ignite, stronger than the cold, stronger than fear. This small, fragile life depended entirely on him, and he would not fail. The forest, the storm, the shadows, they could all wait. For now, survival meant one thing: keeping the foal alive, step by painful step through the unforgiving snow. And somewhere in the swirling white, the watcher drew closer, patient, massive, and silent. The wind had barely eased when James sensed it, a presence in the forest far heavier than snow or branches. The foal pressed itself closer, trembling against his chest, ears flat. He froze, scanning through the haze of snow and shadow. And then he saw it. A massive horse, its coat dark as storm clouds, emerged from the trees with a grace that made the forest seem to hold its breath. It was enormous, easily twice the size of any horse James had ever seen, muscles rippling beneath a thick, glistening coat. Its eyes were sharp, intelligent, and cautious, tracking every movement of the two of them. Steam rose from its nostrils as it exhaled, mingling with the snow in the frigid air. James's heart pounded. He had dealt with danger before in deserts, in combat, but nothing like this. This was pure, wild power, alive and untamed, sizing him up in an instant. He tightened his hold on the foal, lowering his body slightly to appear less threatening. "It's okay," he whispered, though the words felt fragile against the vast silence of the forest. The horse took a step closer, each hoof sinking into the deep snow with a sound that seemed deafening in the quiet. The foal stiffened, shying slightly, but didn't pull away. James held his ground, meeting the horse's gaze. There was a silent negotiation, a test of wills. He could feel the raw force radiating off the animal, potentially lethal, yet strangely protective. For several tense moments, neither moved. Then the horse lowered its head, nostrils flaring as it sniffed the foal. The little animal shivered but did not retreat, and James felt a flicker of hope. He slowly extended a gloved hand, palm open, and murmured soothingly. The massive horse's ears twitched. It regarded him carefully, as if weighing his intentions. A low snort shook the air, snow dusting its muzzle, and the forest seemed to exhale. The horse stepped back slightly, then circled, moving closer to the foal with cautious grace. James's tension eased just a fraction, though he remained alert. The foal nuzzled toward the stranger, tentative but curious. It was clear they recognized each other. In that moment, James felt something shift in the forest, in himself. Years of discipline and fear, battles fought and lost, seemed to melt against the raw, unspoken understanding between these two creatures. He realized the horse wasn't a threat, it was a guardian, a wild spirit claiming the foal as its own. The storm had slowed, letting flakes drift lazily from the sky, but the weight of the encounter lingered. James exhaled slowly, letting his body relax for the first time in hours. The foal pressed against the wild horse, whinnying softly, and the massive animal nuzzled it with a gentleness that belied its size. James stepped back, allowing the two to bond, heart pounding in awe and relief. The forest seemed alive around them, the snow whispering secrets, the wind carrying echoes of survival and trust. For a fleeting, unforgettable moment, everything, man, foal, and massive wild horse stood in quiet harmony, bound by courage, patience, and a fragile spark of trust. And then, with a powerful shake of its head, the massive horse stepped back into the shadows, leaving James and the foal to continue their journey together, the echo of hooves fading into the snow-covered silence. The snow had slowed to a gentle drift by the time James began moving again, careful to keep the foal close against his chest. Its small body had warmed slightly under his coat, and the rhythmic rise and fall of its breathing was steadying, almost comforting. The forest, once threatening, now seemed calmer, as if acknowledging the bond that had formed between them. Every step through the knee-deep snow was a battle, but James refused to stop. The foal, sensing safety, leaned into him, trusting in a way that made his chest tighten. He remembered the massive wild horse, its power, its patience, the silent protection it had offered. It was a reminder that even in the harshest wilderness, alliances could form in unexpected ways, and survival often depended on trust. Hours passed as they made their slow trek toward lower ground, where James hoped to find a ranger cabin or a cleared path to civilization. Each crunch of snow beneath his boots felt amplified in the quiet forest. The foal occasionally whimpered, but James murmured reassurances, scratching behind its ears whenever he could. He had seen enough loss in his life to recognize the fragility of hope, and he wasn't letting it slip now. Then, through the drifting snow, a shadow appeared at the edge of the tree line. James froze. The massive wild horse had returned, standing tall and still, eyes locked on the foal. It didn't advance, it merely watched, a sentinel ensuring the small life remained safe. The foal lifted its head, ears pricked, and whinnied softly. The massive horse lowered its head slightly, and James felt the weight of unspoken understanding pass between them. They reached a clearing where a small ranger cabin emerged from the snow, smoke curling from the chimney. Relief flooded James's body, but he didn't relax immediately. He gently set the foal down, letting it step onto the snow with trembling legs. It looked back at him, then at the massive horse, and then forward as if sensing the promise of safety. James approached the cabin, calling softly for help. Rangers emerged, surprised by the unexpected visitors. But the foal's safety was no longer in doubt, and the massive horse lingered at the tree line before slipping silently back into the forest. James watched it go, a profound respect settling over him. As he helped the foal into the warmth of the cabin, he realized how much he had changed in a single day. Courage, patience, and trust values honed in years of military service had guided him through the storm. But it was empathy, the willingness to connect with something smaller, weaker, and afraid, that had carried him through. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and forgiving. The foal nuzzled against a warm blanket, safe at last. And James, standing in the doorway, felt a rare, deep calm, a sense that even in the wilderness, even in the harshest cold, life could be protected, nurtured, and understood. The storm had passed entirely by morning, leaving the forest coated in sparkling white. Sunlight pierced the thinning clouds, glinting off snow-laden branches and casting a gentle glow over the frost-covered ground. James stepped outside the ranger cabin, the crisp air biting at his cheeks but filling his lungs with clarity. The forest was quiet now, peaceful, as if it had forgiven him for the chaos of the day before. He glanced at the foal, now safe inside, munching hesitantly on some hay provided by the rangers. Its coat had dried partially, and the shivering had ceased. Relief washed over him. Every moment of fear, every ounce of effort in the storm, felt worth it as he watched the little creature explore its new surroundings with tentative curiosity. The foal's wide eyes occasionally met his, and James felt the faint spark of recognition still there, an unspoken bond that had formed in the white silence of the forest. And then, from the tree line, he saw it again. The massive wild horse. It stood motionless, watching from the edge of the clearing. Its coat gleamed in the early sunlight, dark and almost regal against the sparkling snow. Their eyes met, and James felt a shiver not of fear, but of awe. The wild horse was a living embodiment of freedom, strength, and patience, and yet it had allowed him, a human, to protect the foal. For a long moment, he simply watched, understanding that trust could transcend species, circumstance, and even fear itself. James thought about the day's events, the storm, the near-fatal cold, and the raw intensity of the encounter. His military training had prepared him for danger, for calculated action in chaos, but nothing had prepared him for this kind of connection. The lessons weren't tactical, they were elemental: patience, empathy, and the willingness to put oneself in service of another life. And in that, he realized something profound about himself. In the quiet, unforgiving wilderness, he had found a part of himself that had been buried beneath years of loss, battle, and isolation. He had survived not only the storm, but also a confrontation with his own fears and doubts. The foal whinnied softly from the cabin, breaking his reverie. He smiled, a rare, easy expression, and adjusted his coat. The foal's trust had reminded him that even the smallest beings could inspire courage and hope. The wild horse flicked its tail, nostrils flaring, and then began to retreat into the forest, moving with a powerful grace that seemed almost ceremonial. James watched until it vanished among the trees, a living shadow fading into the wilderness, leaving him with both awe and gratitude. He thought about the future the foal would be cared for, nurtured, and given a chance at life it might never have had without him. And he, too, had been given a gift. The experience had reminded him that life was not only about survival, but about connection, responsibility, and compassion. The forest had tested him, pushed him to his limits, and in return, it had shown him that even in harshness, there could be beauty, trust, and understanding. James walked slowly back to the cabin, each step firm in the snow. Inside, the warmth embraced him, but it was the quiet that lingered in his mind, the silence of snow, the steady breaths of the foal, the distant presence of the wild horse. He knew that the memory of this day would remain with him, etched into him like tracks in fresh snow, unerasable and profound. He knelt beside the foal, brushing its soft mane with careful fingers. "You'll be okay," he murmured, and this time, the words felt complete, not just a hope or a promise, but a truth confirmed by struggle and survival. The foal nuzzled his hand, and James felt a surge of something he hadn't felt in years' peace. The sun climbed higher, melting the frost, and James stepped to the doorway, looking out over the forest one last time. Somewhere out there, the massive wild horse roamed free, a guardian in the wilderness. And he, too, was free not from the past, but from the weight of it, lighter in the knowledge that life, even in its smallest, most fragile forms, could be protected, cherished, and understood. The wind stirred gently, carrying the faint scent of pine and snow, and James exhaled, a slow, deliberate breath. He had walked into the storm alone, but he would leave it changed, stronger, and profoundly connected to the foal, to the wild horse, and to the quiet, resilient spirit of life itself. The forest was no longer just a place of danger. It was a place of lessons, of trust, and of the enduring bond between lives that chose to believe in each other. And in that, James found a rare, luminous hope, a reminder that even in the coldest winters, warmth could be found where hearts dared to reach out.